A mother cradled in her enfeebled arms the child, last of many, whose glazed eye was about to close for ever. Here beauty, late glowing in youthful lustre and consciousness, now wan and neglected, knelt fanning with uncertain motion the beloved, who lay striving to paint his features, distorted by illness, with a thankful smile. There a hard-featured, weather-worn veteran, having prepared his meal, sat, his head dropped on his breast, the useless knife falling from his grasp, his limbs utterly relaxed, as thought of wife and child and dearest relative, all lost, passed across his recollection. There sat a man who for 40 years had basked in fortune's tranquil sunshine. He held the hand of his last hope, his beloved daughter, who had just attained womanhood, and he gazed on her with anxious eyes, while she tried to rally her fainting spirit to comfort him. Here a servant, faithful to the last, though dying, waited on one, who, though still erect with health, gazed with gasping fear on the variety of woe around. Adrian stood leaning against a tree. He held a book in his hand, but his eye wandered from the pages, and sought mine. They mingled a sympathetic glance. His looks confessed that his thoughts had quitted the inanimate print, for pages more pregnant with meaning, more absorbing, spread out before him. By the margin of the stream, apart from all, in a tranquil nook, where the purling brook kissed the green sward gently, Clara and Evelyn were at play, sometimes beating the water with large bows, sometimes watching the summer flies that sported upon it. Evelyn now chased a butterfly, now gathered a flower for his cousin, and his laughing cherub face and clear brow told of the light heart that beat in his bosom. Clara, though she endeavoured to give herself up to his amusement, often forgot him as she turned to observe Adrian and me. She was now 14, and retained her childish appearance, though in height a woman, she acted the part of the tenderest mother to my little orphan boy. To see her playing with him, or attending silently and submissively on our wants, you thought only of her admirable docility and patience, but in her soft eyes, and the veined curtains that veiled them, in the clearness of her marmoreal brow, and the tender expression of her lips, there was an intelligence and beauty that at once excited admiration and love. When the sun had sunk towards the precipitate west, and the evening shadows grew long, we prepared to ascend the mountain. The attention that we were obliged to pay to the sick made our progress slow. The winding road, though steep, presented a confined view of rocky fields and hills, each hiding the other, till our farther ascent disclosed them in succession. We were seldom shaded from the declining sun, whose slant beams were instinct with exhausting heat. There are times when minor difficulties grow gigantic, when, as the Hebrew poet expressively terms it, the grasshopper is a burthen. So was it with our ill-fated party this evening. Adrian, usually the first to rally his spirits, and dash foremost into fatigue and hardship, with relaxed limbs and declined head, the reins hanging loosely in his grasp, left the choice of the path to the instinct of his horse, now and then painfully rousing himself, when the steepness of the ascent required that he should keep his seat with better care. Fear and horror encompassed me. Did his languid air attest that he also was struck with contagion? How long, when I look on his matchless specimen of mortality, may I perceive that his thought answers mine? How long will those limbs obey the kindly spirit within? How long will light and life dwell in the eyes of this my sole remaining friend? Thus pacing slowly, each hill surmounted only presented another to be ascended. Each jutting corner only discovered another, sister to the last, endlessly. Sometimes the pressure of sickness in one among us caused the whole cavalcade to halt. The call for water, the eagerly expressed wish to repose, the cry of pain, and suppressed sob of the mourner, such were the sorrowful attendants of our passage of the Jura. Adrian had gone first. I saw him while I was detained by the loosening of a girth, struggling with the upward path, seemingly more difficult than any we had yet passed. He reached the top, and the dark outline of his figure stood in relief against the sky. He seemed to behold something unexpected and wonderful, for, pausing, his head stretched out, his arms for a moment extended, he seemed to give an all hail to some new vision. Urged by curiosity, I hurried to join him. After battling for many tedious minutes with the precipice, the same scene presented itself to me, which had wrapped him in ecstatic wonder. Nature, or nature's favourite, the lovely earth, presented her most unrivalled beauties in resplendent and sudden exhibition. Below, far, far below, even as it were in the yawning abyss of the ponderous globe, lay the placid and azure expanse of Lake Leman. Vine-covered hills hedged it in, and behind dark mountains in cone-like shape, our irregular cyclopean wall served for further defence. But beyond and high above all, as if the spirits of the air had suddenly unveiled their bright abodes, placed in scaleless altitude in the stainless sky, heaven-kissing, companions of the unattainable ether, were the glorious Alps, clothed in dazzling robes of light by the setting sun. And as if the world's wonders were never to be exhausted, their vast immensities, their jagged crags and roseate painting, appeared again in the lake below, dipping their proud heights beneath the unruffled waves, palaces for the naiads of the placid waters. Towns and villages lay scattered at the foot of Jura, which, with dark ravine and black promontories, stretched its roots into the watery expanse beneath. Carried away by wonder, I forgot the death of man, and the living and beloved friend near me. When I turned, I saw tears streaming from his eyes. His thin hands pressed one against the other, his animated countenance beaming with admiration. "Why," cried he at last, "why, O heart, whisperest thou of grief to me? Drink in the beauty of that scene, and possess delight beyond what a fabled paradise could afford." By degrees our whole party surmounting the steep joined us, not one among them but gave visible tokens of admiration, surpassing any before experienced. One cried, "God reveals his heaven to us, we may die blessed." Another and another, with broken exclamations and extravagant phrases, endeavoured to express the intoxicating effect of this wonder of nature. So we remained a while, lightened of the pressing burthen of fate, forgetful of death, into whose night we were about to plunge, no longer reflecting that our eyes now and for ever were and would be the only ones which might perceive the divine magnificence of this terrestrial exhibition. An enthusiastic transport, akin to happiness, burst, like a sudden ray from the sun, on our darkened life, precious attribute of war-worn humanity, that can snatch ecstatic emotion even from under the very Sharon harrow, that ruthlessly ploughs up and lays waste every hope. This evening was marked by another event. Passing through Ferney on our way to Geneva, unaccustomed sounds of music arose from the rural church which stood embosomed in trees, surrounded by smokeless, vacant cottages. The peal of an organ with rich swell awoke the mute air, lingering along and mingling with the intense beauty that clothed the rocks and woods and waves around. Music, the language of the immortals, disclosed to us as testimony of their existence. Music, silver key of the fountain of tears, child of love, soother of grief, inspirer of heroism and radiant thoughts. O music, in this our desolation we had forgotten thee. Nor pipe at eve cheered us, nor harmony of voice, nor linked thrill of string. Thou camest upon us now, like the revealing of other forms of being, and transported as we had been by the loveliness of nature, fancying that we beheld the abode of spirits. Now we might well imagine that we heard their melodious communings. We paused in such awe as would seize on a pale votarist, visiting some holy shrine at midnight, if she beheld animated and smiling the image which she worshipped. We all stood mute, many knelt. In a few minutes, however, we were recalled to human wonder and sympathy by a familiar strain. The air was Haydn's new created world, and, old and drooping as humanity had become, the world yet fresh as at creation's day might still be worthily celebrated by such an hymn of praise. Adrian and I entered the church. The nave was empty, though the smoke of incense rose from the altar, bringing with it the recollection of vast congregations. In once thronged cathedrals, we went into the loft. A blind old man sat at the bellows, his whole soul was ear, and as he sat in the attitude of attentive listening, a bright glow of pleasure was diffused over his countenance, for though his lacklustre eye could not reflect the beam, yet his parted lips and every line of his face and venerable brow spoke delight. A young woman sat at the keys, perhaps 20 years of age. Her auburn hair hung on her neck, and her fair brow shone in its own beauty, but her drooping eyes let fall fast-flowing tears, while the constraint she exercised to suppress her sobs and still her trembling flushed her else pale cheek, She was thin; languor, and alas! sickness, bent her form. We stood looking at